We are back. It is Combine Week in Indianapolis. Can I say beautiful Indianapolis? I don't know. Temperature-wise, looking pretty good. I tried to make this analogy, Eddie Garrison. I know it's an awful one. By the way, thank you for tuning in. Colts Corner with myself, Kevin Bowen, Eddie Garrison. The weather during Combine Week, I feel like it's a little bit like spring awakening for the NFL. The last month, especially if your team's not in the Super Bowl, it sucks. And so you've been talking about these topics endlessly, and now it's like, oh, right, a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. We're starting to get some answers. Hey, here are the draft prospects. Hey, boom, free agency's in less than 2 weeks. Oh, yeah, Colts offseason program's going to start coming up in April 21st, I believe Shane Steichen said. And then, boom, there's a draft, and then it's a month of May, and we're all happy again. The weather's good, and here we are. I kind of look at that for the Combine. We're going to play this Chris Ballard interview right out of the gate. The chunk of today's podcast from myself and Eddie will be just Combine takeaways from Ballard and Steichen. I would say right now, Eddie, I know you guys are going to have Shane Steichen on later today. We are recording this Wednesday morning. We heard from Shane for about 20 minutes yesterday in two different scrums. And then we heard from Ballard about the same amount of time. And then we had Ballard on our morning show, which is what you are about to hear. So we had a lot of takeaways, a lot of audio in general to dissect from those two. So I guess I should start off by saying good morning to you.
Good morning. Kevin, I'll make your analogy much simpler. Outside right now in Indianapolis, it feels like opening day.
Ooh. And did Ellie just hit a home run or two?
He hit 2 in spring training. Game number 1, I said bubble wrap him up and just save him for opening day. Because that's the MVP right there.
Amen to that, brother. I think a month from tomorrow, maybe 27th.
Oh, who's counting?
Something like that.
You're right.
That is the voice of Eddie Garrison. Again, I'm Kevin Bowen. Let's play this, Eddie. Our fan morning show. You'll hear some different voices, maybe a familiar one from a Colts beat standpoint. James Boyd has joined us on the morning show. Love James's work. Looking forward to bouncing stuff off him here moving forward. So you'll hear James Boyd. You'll also hear Jeff Rickard, who has been in our station before. And he is the one that I think he kicks off this interview. Is that right, Eddie?
Yes, that is correct.
So this is about 15, 20 minutes from Chris Ballard. Just a bit of a preview. I wanted to make sure we asked some specific present-day stuff. I had a few follow-ups in relation to what he had said at the podium the day prior. And then I also wanted to get into some big picture. I know a lot of that maybe got lost in the press conference setting at the end of the year, but I still had some lingering, why a 9th year and what is your greatest achievement, kind of things like that I wanted to make sure we got to as well. So I appreciated Chris Ballard's time and him answering, I think, pretty much all of our questions. So here you go. Chris Ballard with us on the Fan Morning Show.
Tell you what, for a morning checkdown, how about we just go and talk to Chris Ballard? What do you say about that, Kevin Bowen? Would you be happy with that?
I'm all
James
in.
Boyd, you in on that?
Sounds good to me.
I like that. The general manager of the Indianapolis Colts stops by here on the Fan Morning Show, 95.107.5 The Fan. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, you too.
It's been a minute.
How you been?
I've been good.
Awesome.
These guys are propping me up, but other than that, we're doing all right. You certainly had a busy day yesterday, and, when you talk now, what's it like knowing that whatever you say, everybody's just going to magnify it and try to read the tea leaves and everything else for the next 48 hours or so?
That's always the case. So it is. Oh,
there we go, right there.
Is that better?
Yep.
Yeah. No, that's always the case. No matter what you say, they're going to cut it, splice it, and make it their own in terms of what it means. So
why are you looking right at me when you say that?
No, I'm giving a shot to him. The passive-aggressive one to my right.
We'll let you ask the first question.
Passive-aggressive. I mean, I did ask, hey, injury-prone versus...
He said he's ready to go Mike Wallace on you today. I don't know.
But one of the things, it was a bit, I would say myself, surprising to hear that it's open a competition. So what do you think that just does for Anthony to have that out there in the open? I need to talk to him as well and to challenge him in that way.
Look, I think it's good for any player to get a little uncomfortable, and I think you can get the best out of people when you're uncomfortable. It is hard. You wish they were all. There's the elite of the elite, the Jordans, the Kobe Bryants, the Peyton Mannings of the world. That just no matter what the circumstances are, they're gonna reach to the highest level. And I think any player that can be challenged and really has to win something, the work they put in to win it, when they finally get it, they don't want to give it up. So I think this will be a good thing, not only for him, but also our football team.
It's voice Chris Ballard here, live at the Combine. Chris, as always, we appreciate the time. I know it's a super busy week for you. I had 2 items exiting yesterday that I wanted to hit on. First, Braden Smith. You mentioned he wants to play football again. Is now the question, will he be playing football for you?
Well, hopefully. All right. I'm not going to sit here and say 100% because we're working through that. And I still got to visit with Braden again. But when we talked this last week, he's in a good place. He's done a lot of work. And then we'll visit again here in the next 10 days. So we'll see how that plays out.
And then you kind of doubled down. Obviously, in January, it was much more, I think, maybe even an emotional state of got to add more competition, running back was a mistake, et cetera, et cetera. Yesterday, you said, I haven't done enough to make this team good enough for our staff. Where specifically do you feel that is?
Well, look, we drafted a young quarterback. I think we all know it starts right there. So we knew there was going to be some bumps. And anytime you take a young quarterback that hadn't really played a lot of football, you're taking a risk. So there definitely can be questions asked. Did we make the right move? Not in terms of drafting him, but did we, putting him out there to play so soon? Okay, so you got to learn to analyze everything you're doing as you go along the way. And then once you get that position humming, well, a lot of things will fall into place. I think we've played pretty good up front. Not the sack production on the defensive front that we had a year ago, but I think we've done pretty good up front. I think at the skill position, we have, especially at wideout, I think we finally got to a place where we've got our own guys, so young players. They're all ascending. I think that's a good thing. I think the biggest area I think we all know is the secondary. That's the one where we got to do some more work. We got to get some more playmakers, guys that can really make a difference, in the back end. Not easy to find. Not always, sometimes you're subject to what's available. And you got to get, here's the market and here's what's available. Not only in the draft, but also in free agency and also in, guys that get released. So a lot to work with, in terms of the back end. But I do think we have some pieces that, are young and still ascending.
And I'm not asking about wideout.
I mean, I almost said a cuss word.
No, I thought that was a loud F in a breath.
I dumped just to be safe.
See, we're not so bad, Chris.
James was not here. He obsessed. And that's when we were winning. That's when we were doing good.
Last year at this time, I think Brock Bauer was speaking to the media, maybe Tyler Warren tomorrow. Yeah.
Well, one that I do want to follow up on, and me being passive-aggressive, I love it. To be aggressive, seriously.
I knew you would get defensive on that little shot.
I mean, we love it. No, you know what's funny? I talk about this all the time. We throw jabs at you all day long, and if you throw like 3 back, everyone loses their mind.
It's great.
Oh my God. I'm like,
That's
all right,
great.
it's fine. Like, we do this all the time. So we're all grown men. That's fine. But in all seriousness, hearing that comment, okay, open competition, I'm thinking, is this smoke screen? Like, how realistic is it for you to potentially have someone else come in and win the job when he's a number 4 pick 2 years ago? Like, how do you sell another quarterback on potentially coming here to compete, and how do you sell him on it being real and feeling real?
See, I mean, and it's like with anything. Until we actually get out there and do it, this will be the question. Like, how can you do it? How can they have the number 4 guy? Like, I don't know what I can do to convince you that this is true.
But I think it's about the other quarterback. It's about convincing the new quarterback.
And that's kind of the point I made yesterday. Is I think it depends on, who it is. And look, it was, and there's a lot of guys that, that in this league that have had rebound careers who have done great things. I even look at the year we had Gardner. That we did a lot of good things well that year, and look, we come down to about 2 or 3 plays at the end that cost us winning the division and going to the playoffs. So you never know where that guy's going to come from, and there's free agency, there's the draft, there's a lot of avenues. You just never know. I mean, I'm sure Frisco didn't exactly 100% know they were getting with the last pick of the draft, Brock Purdy. So you just never know where that guy comes from.
Is trade an option as well?
I won't get into that.
Yeah,
I'm not going to say it's not. I'm not going to say it's not. I mean, not like we haven't done it before. I mean,
very fair.
Yeah.
Chris Ballard here with us live at the Convention Center, NFL Combine 2025. I guess on the trade front, you look at 14 overall and you think that needs to be a draft pick, or do you look at it as what you did a handful of years ago and making a move for DeForest Buckner?
I think it just depends. I mean, It had to be the right guy. That sometimes you got to get a little luck. You do. I mean, a luck with continuing to dig and dig into who's out there. Circumstances kind of matched up that year when we were able to get to Forrest. So we'll see. It can go either way. We think it's a good draft. And I think there's going to be a really good player there at 14. But we'll see.
I know.
And whether we're moving up or back, I mean, I think that usually plays out on draft day.
I know it remains to be seen, obviously 2 weeks away from the real fireworks, if you will, but how much do you expect free agency to be different than how you've handled it in previous off seasons?
I think maybe just from my mindset, we will do what we have to do to make the team better. And that doesn't mean we're going to be undisciplined and do something just wild. Don't expect, okay, here's Colts and they've just spent $400 million on, all these different players. But we'll do our best to make this team better. I think that's the biggest thing we have to focus on. And the one thing I do get, I don't want to say frustrated, but sometimes I think is unrealistic, is everybody lists a name. Like, if you don't get this name, it's not.
I'm guilty.
Yeah. And just all you have to do is look back and grade yourself.
Yeah.
Just grade yourself. And look, there's been times when I wish I would have done just a hair more to get a couple players that we were heavily involved with in free agency. Maybe if I'd have pushed a little hair more financially.
Is that where you view the difference for this offseason?
I think that's probably the biggest difference. Like, sometimes you just gotta finish it. And I think that's one of the things we have to look at. And then you have to have two that want to tango. They got to want to come here too.
We got Chris Ballard, general manager of the Indianapolis Colts, joining us here on the Fan Morning Show. When you look at this draft and the available players, it kind of feels, from my viewpoint and a lot of others, that maybe it's a defensive-heavy draft. Do you kind of see it that way right now?
I would agree. There's some really, in the last few days in interviews, I know we've had a bunch of defensive players in there, and they are. It's a talented group. I think at all three levels.
Yeah.
O-line, at D-line, linebacker, and in the secondary. So yeah, it is a heavy defensive. There's no question it's a heavy defensive draft.
So does that help you being at 14? Because we all know guys get pipped at 11, 12, but the pool of defensive players there. If Warren is gone,
I know where you're getting at.
I know.
Did you just not know where this one was?
Let's go.
One was coming from.
I decided to let him.
There could be a wide out there. There could be a great O-lineman there. Think of the other offensive positions that could get pushed down. Wouldn't you love to see you two just lose it? If we take an O-lineman right there, just an all-pro guy that goes to Pro Bowl as an O-lineman.
I am on the record of saying this is a sneaky need, baby.
It's not terrible.
Nice guard for you there at 14.
But to the broader point,
nothing was better when we took Quentin, and they didn't know how to react to that one, because they knew we needed to fix the O-line, but it was a guard.
And now he's on a Hall of Fame trajectory, and the rest is history. I will say, in mock drafts, your boy don't choose too many offensive linemen in mock drafts. I don't know many people who do that. It's not. I said your boy here, me. Oh. I don't know too many offensive linemen I'm choosing in my mock draft. That's always the one I get yelled at for.
Quarterbacks are happy when you do that, though, right?
There you go.
Chris Ballard with us here, year 9 for him. I guess let's go there. Why do you feel like you are getting a 9th year?
Look, it's a fair question. One that I think y'all know me well enough that I'm pretty honest. I'm pretty authentic. I feel fortunate to get another chance at this. We've had some, I wouldn't say bad luck, but we've had some bad luck. But I don't. That is what it is. That happens across the league. I did think we had a really good start to this thing under some tough circumstances. And then at the end of the 22 season, when everything kind of went south, where we had traded for the quarterback, we had signed Stephon Gilmore. It just didn't sometimes, and we had made moves. People, we forget about those moves, but at the time were really lauded, but didn't work. And not to those guys' fault; they're both great players, but I didn't put enough around them. And then when the organization decided to move forward, and move on from Frank, Jim and I had a long talk, and he said, "Chris, look, I'm going to give you. I believe you can get this done. I'm going to give you an opportunity to get it done." So when we hired Shane, you're still. maybe I probably should have looked at the situation a little different because we had I thought we had a really good roster still at the time. I didn't think it was as bad as how we played in 22 with some additions. And I think Jim, he had enough patience he knows I'm very honest even when we have our talks. Like I don't sit and try to blame others and throw everybody under the bus. Presented what we thought was a pretty good plan, and we'll see how it plays out this year.
Did you feel you needed to pitch yourself or pitch it to him like you deserved a ninth year, or did
I think I think you know me well enough. That's not me. Hey, here's what it is. This is where we're at, and this is what we need to get done, and I'm confident we can get it done. I think you know me well enough to know, Kevin, that I'm not one politicking behind the scenes and doing. No, that's just not how I roll.
One that I asked Shane yesterday in the season, he's like, we're right there. We're close to flipping this thing. You come out a few days later and say, we're not close. But it's semantics. It's probably just different views as far as where the team is and different roles within the franchise. But all that to say, how do you view where the state of the team is now versus where you want to go ultimately in living in that little bit of purgatory of being there but not being there, if that makes sense?
That's something I've thought about a lot too. I mean, look, we want to win the Super Bowl. I mean, that's your ultimate goal. And for me to sit here, especially right after the season, and y'all go, hey, how close? Like, I'm being honest. Like, I told the team that. Like, no, we got work to do. And we've got to create enough competition and get the right people in the building that we're going to have a chance to do that. The time will tell, if we can get there or not. I believe we can, but I'm emotional. I will say what's like when you ask me a question, especially at the end of the season. When you ask me a question, I'm going to answer it, the way I'm feeling at the time. I usually don't give a slanted. Carbon copy of what everybody. I just here's what it is. So I think Shane and I are no doubt in agreement of we got work to do. But it's never as if you look at this league, how many games come down to one score, one possession. We certainly had a lot of them last year. And I think that's, as you build confidence, you got a chance to push it over on those one-score games, which most of our games come down to anyways.
Chris, tell us a little bit about your new defensive coordinator, Lou Anarumo. Why him, and what does he bring?
Well, look, we'd been watching. We happened to scrimmage against him. Yeah. So we got a live look at him then, and I remember telling Shane after the press, man, he is versatile on defense. He does a lot. He stresses you, not only schematically, but with his disguise and the things he's doing. And then I know Shane had to coach against him numerous times and always used to say, hey, look, this guy's very difficult to prepare for. So, and then after visiting with him and knowing his reputation, we have a lot of similar people that we've crossed paths with. We thought it was a great choice.
Will you have to scout differently at any position defensively?
A little bit, especially up front. I mean, Lou, and look, you always want big and fast, but,
it's a big dude.
Yeah. I mean,
another DeForest Buckner, right?
Yeah, and Grover Stewart, who I think is probably one of the most underappreciated players in our league.
What about corner?
Big. So we're in agreement. We do want length. He's going to want to play some more, tight coverage, which I think is a good thing. I think it's a benefit to the guys we currently have on the roster. But at the end of the day, he's also flexible. It's not like, hey, this is what I want and this is what I need. And this is with any coach, you've got to be flexible. Like sometimes this is what you have on the market, and this is what you have to adjust and play with.
How do you think he'll help with just the accountability part? I mean, first day he was there, he goes, I don't care how long you played, where you played, how your resume looks, you got to earn it. And I think that's something DeForest Buckner alluded to as well at the end of the season.
I think it's great. And I don't want to – look, the other one we hired, we've hired a couple guys that I think are really good. But like Chris Hewitt, I think is outstanding. I don't know if we're paying enough attention to – I mean, this guy's been in Baltimore – and done a tremendous job in Baltimore. And I think they've been there a long time. Thought, hey, you know what? I need to branch out. And I think he is really good. And you just look at what they've been able to do in Baltimore in the secondary and some of the guys they played with. And then to kind of get a little lucky and get Jerome Henderson, who's a veteran DB coach who just happened to be out there and had a relationship with Lou. We got to visit with him. He's humble. He's a freaking good coach. I don't want to underestimate the addition of those two because I think they're outstanding.
Again, that's the voice of Chris Ballard. Just a couple of minutes left here with the Colts GM. A quote that really stood out to me in January was, "We need more tough guys." And you answered that in relation to a question about the inability to win kind of late season games. How do you define that? How do you define tough guys?
I think there's two things because it's hard. It's funny, I just talked to a group about resilience last week at one of the high schools, and how resilience is it's a feeling in my mind. Like, resilience doesn't feel good when you think about it. Resilience doesn't feel good when you're going through it. But how do you become resilient? You got to fail, you got to suffer, you got to get dragged through the mud a little bit. And I think as we scout, and I'm not saying I think we do have some guys that have that quality. But competition and knowing that, hey, if I don't perform, I'm either going to be on the bench or I'm not going to be here. Usually will help create that resilience and that feeling of being uncomfortable along the way. At one point, I would tell you, I thought we had a really resilient, and I don't want to say we don't have it's not where I think it needs to be. And I think we can stress them too, not only with the kids we bring, the players we bring in, but also how we prepare. Shane and I have talked a long time about that. Not that what we've done in the past is bad, but maybe it needs just to be a hair a little different. So we'll see how we adjust in that way too.
Last one from me. If you look back on your 8 years, what do you feel like your greatest achievement is as a GM?
2018 was really fun. And I wouldn't say a greatest achievement because it's never just me. Like, there's a bunch of people to win. It takes everybody. There's like I'll get a lot of the credit when we have success, and I'll get a lot of the blame which I deserve whenever we don't. But it takes a lot of people to have success. But watching Andrew come back from what he came back from, watching that team come back from 1-5, that was a cool experience. I mean, it really was. That was one of the coolest experiences in my career. And then building it where we were at. I mean, and with all those young, you remember how young we were.
Yeah,
I mean,
Leonard was huge.
We were young. You had Braden, you had Quentin, you had Leonard, we were really, really young. So that would be one. 2020 season is both a high and a low because I really thought we could, we lose that tough game in Buffalo. But bouncing back from 19, I thought those two seasons really stick with me. And then, and even in these hard years, we've had some cool moments that I really enjoyed. Like in 21, going to Buffalo and doing what we did to Buffalo, that was, and Frisco that. We went to Buffalo and Frisco that year and New England at home. If you remember the end of that game when Jonathan broke it, and the sound of the crowd and the excitement, there's been some other cool game moments, but 18 and 20 were really, those are neat seasons. And in 20 especially just because of COVID. You remember what we went, like we almost forget how hard that was on everybody. Y'all, us,
so
players.
Weird, yeah.
And to be able to do that in very tough circumstances when other teams didn't, it was a credit to the organization.
Last one from me. I read a story from Indy Star, actually, when you were first on the job, no facial hair. You looked super young. And they said you had a binder and you had kept all these, notes and stuff throughout the years. So I say all that to say, you got a new binder, or how do you go about just assessing what you've learned, not only from yourself and your experiences, but what works and doesn't work league-wide?
Yeah, I've got I probably don't do it as much on paper, but I'm going to show you. I have got, if y'all ever get your hands on this, y'all would have a field day.
I was about to say, pass it over, brother. This is good content.
I've got 40 400 notes, and I have them all organized on. So usually at the end of every day, I have a book that I write in, but then I'll type it in. At the end of every day, I kind of type out and chronicle, okay, this is what I would have. It's quick. It dumps my mind. Like, one of the things that's hard, I don't know if it's with y'all too, sometimes I can't turn my mind off at night. So you go home and, like, it's, especially when you care. You know, you care about what you're doing, the people you're doing it with, the city. Like, one thing y'all don't think y'all have ever got about me, like the criticism. I think that's fair. I like the debate. I like the banner. That's okay. Everybody has an opinion. I think everybody has a right to an opinion. I think that's one of the things that makes our country really special. But where my disappointment when we don't do well comes for, I feel like I'm letting an entire city organization down, and I want to do well for them. But at night, like when things are not going your way, like, I got to dump it. I got to dump my thoughts, or I will not sleep.
Sanity.
I will not sleep. So I've gotten where before I go to bed, I'll just, okay, here's what the day was. Here's the things I've learned. Here's where we got to, we've got to move forward.
Last thing for me, it's the topic of the whole combine right now. It's not really in your wheelhouse for obvious reasons, but is Travis Hunter a wide receiver or a defensive back? How would you use a guy like that?
I'd let him be special. I mean, he's special. Like, we got blinders on all the time to conventional thinking of what it should look like with a player. Like, oh, he has to play one position. Why not? Why not let him play both? He's a freak talent. He's a good kid who works. Like, why not? Why not give it a shot? I know this. Whatever he ends up doing, he's going to be an excellent player. You put the tape on, and, everybody's going to have an opinion of which they think is better. It's 50-50 for me. You watch him as a wideout, and you're like, holy cow, this guy's really special. You watch him at corner, he can really cover. Like, why not? Now, there'll come a point where Father Time starts to jump on him a little bit, where maybe he has to make a decision. But early in his career, why not?
Eddie, I know you had a chance to listen to that this morning. What do you think of the Colts GM?
I thought he was really open. I thought he answered all of your questions directly. He didn't really beat around the bush outside of the typical stuff of, are you going to make a trade up in the draft? Are you going to make a trade for a quarterback? Or,
right.
The whole Braden Smith situation. We'll get to that when we get to it. Well, that'll get resolved down the road kind of deal. I thought him doubling and tripling and quadrupling down on the competition aspect of this is a fascinating discussion, because I may sit in a different boat with how that is a bad thing, not only for him, but for Shane and Anthony. By bringing
that
in
thought to when we get to Anthony. Okay, yeah. Hold that thought. Thank you for that, but hold that.
And then I thought, just him validating and explaining himself behind the comment of getting, they need to be tougher, they need to be more physical or whatever, as the games get along. And it seems like he's got a different look on life, for lack of a better phrase, just because I think there's some sort of understanding to him that most GMs would have been fired after last season, or certainly before, and this is like a second life, a new lease on life for him. And in order for this franchise to get to where it wants to go and where he wants to take this franchise, then he's got to change the way he approaches things, the way he views things, and the way he operates. And right now, from everything that he has said, it sounds like he's going to be operating differently.
I'll get to the short-term stuff here throughout. I think that's kind of where our focus will shift. So let's just go a couple of the bigger picture thoughts that he just shared with us. Why the 9th year? What I read into that, Eddie, is when they fired, and I did find it interesting that he mentioned the organization let Frank go during the middle of the year, i.e., hello, Jeff Saturday. But, assuming Frank Reich wouldn't have been kept at the end of that season, it almost seemed like him and Jim Irsay sat down. That would be Chris Ballard and Jim Irsay sat down and said, all right, we're going to do the Steichen thing, first-year head coach. We're going to draft this kid, and I mean kid, and he's going to be as raw as any first-round pick we've had in the NFL, but I need the window. And I need the window to be big. And so what's the window? Well, we're about to approach year 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, for him, it's year 9, but like we're about to approach year 3 of the new era. It almost seemed like, why are you getting a 9th year? His answer to me, none of it was because of what I've done in the past. Like, for example, and this guy spoke at the podium before Ballard on Tuesday, so he's kind of fresh in my mind. Zach Taylor was over the podium, Bengals head coach. Some people questioned his job security this past season. If you asked him why he's getting another year, he'd say, well, I've been to a Super Bowl. I've been to an AFC title game. Ballard doesn't say that in getting a 9th year. It's more of, no. Irsay said, and we kind of agreed a few years ago, we're going to restart this. It's going to be very patient. We're going to go with a lot of youth. We're not going to get, Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson to team up together, something like that. We're going to need to be patient. Like, that to me is what I take away from why is he getting a 9th year. And again, you hear him answer about the greatest achievement. Well, he's got to go. He goes back to 2018 and 2020. I don't think he's wrong. Frankly, if you and I have debated that question on the podcast, that's why I wanted to ask him that specifically. And when you and I have debated it, I have said, I think the 2018 draft class would be my answer. Nelson, Leonard, Braden Smith, mainly. Like, that's an incredible haul when you think about it. Very, very good haul, certainly. Yeah, that would probably be my answer. He goes back to 2018. But if you just want to isolate seasons, he mentions 2018, 2020. Obviously, those are the best seasons he's had. Undoubtedly. He's exactly right. But those 2 seasons, Eddie, the Colts were the last team in the playoffs and lost to Buffalo, and then one and done against Houston. It's not like they got on some big run, and you're kind of still holding on to like that. Remember that year? If we can just replicate that, if we can just duplicate that, well, again, Andrew Luck's long gone, and Phillip Rivers is long gone. So that, I think, is what, again, it's just frustrating, I think, for Colts fans to, like, you have to point back to those years. You see how many GMs have been hired since then. You see how many head coaches have been hired since then. You see how many teams have had playoff success since then, et cetera, et cetera. And that's kind of what you're pointing to as this is the greatest achievement, and/or, this is why I'm getting the 9th year.
And then the other question that I don't know, I think it was you that asked him about what's your biggest accomplishment, in the long pause there.
Right.
I don't know if that's a pause of trying to find a moment that he views as his most proud or whatever. I think that was the question you asked, or the phrasing. Or if it was him just trying to think of a moment where it was like, what can I say?
Yeah, it was probably the longest pause / the longest answer.
Yeah.
Of any he gave. And again, I don't think he's wrong in his answer. Like, once he got there and he explained 2018 and he explained 2020, I don't think he's wrong. Obviously, if we are in the mode of evaluating those answers, you would say in a bottom line business like the NFL that, you get paid all this money to try and build rosters, you wouldn't say those are the, if you compare them to the rest of the GMs in the league, you wouldn't say those are obviously the greatest of answers you'd want to hear, though. And we brought this up before. Look at the other GMs that were hired in his same cycle. John Lynch, Brandon Beane, and Brett Veach. Well, look at what the 49ers and the Chiefs and the Bills have done. I think that's what, again, is probably frustrating to Colts fans. So, again, thank you to Chris Ballard. I do appreciate the time. Obviously, he probably does. I'm probably the last person he wants to talk to. I don't know if James Boyd's much higher on that list than I. But I always think Chris he's been super respectful to me and professional over the years. So I appreciate that.
Do you want to dive into the Anthony thing before we get into the comments or the combine?
Well, let's just start, I guess, with Anthony. If you will. So again, combine comments. This is going to be Ballard, Steichen, all smushed together. Let's start with Richardson. Open competition. Eddie, what does that mean?
Yeah, what does it mean, Kev?
It's a big phrase. Just like Ballard saying we don't have enough tough guys is a big phrase. When you say it's open competition, that stands out to me. At any position, let me be clear.
I think that's a 3-pronged conversation between Anthony with the quarterback competition, Shane, and Chris.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, how real is it? And I find Ballard's answers, and I say plural because he's been asked it by us and was asked in the podium in different ways. He's said quite often, like, you have to find real production to create open competition. Like, you have to find a real resume.
Yep.
Anthony Richardson wasn't born yesterday. And again, I get that Anthony Richardson is not in a position to be really judging a lot of these people. But, hey, here comes Taylor Heineke. Hey, here comes Mac Jones. Hey, here comes the corpse of Aaron Rodgers. I mean, is that really real competition? So I'm skeptical about it. And again, I thought Ballard offered that a little bit indirectly of saying we need the right guy to create the real competition. And I'll also say this, Eddie. As a quarterback, when you wear a red jersey in the offseason, you have to look utterly horrific to lose your job. You were at training camp last year. Richardson was fine.
Yeah.
He was 65%. Outside of Julian Blackmon making some great interceptions. It's not like he turned the ball over.
Looked confident, looked good.
Right, didn't miss a lot of time.
But then we did find out that the secondary was
so I guess that would be the one question. It's does Lou Anarumo, whatever, expose a little bit more from Anthony Richardson during the month of August than Gus Bradley did? That would be my only reason. It would be disastrous for Anthony. Can you imagine if he lost his starting job before week 1?
That would have been bad.
Well, imagine if it happens this year. Because think about it. He's wearing a red jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And again, last training camp, he performed quite fine. So I'd be, I guess, still surprised if he were to lose his job in some open competition. Now, I get it. I get why you're saying it. Maybe you're saying it honestly more for the free agent that you're trying to acquire. Or, I guess they could go trade route here. But I would ask you this, Eddie. Who defines real competition? I think Justin Fields would.
Mm-hmm.
I think Sam Darnold would. Sam Darnold would probably expect to be the starter. Matthew Stafford would, of course, expect to be. I think we have a Matthew Stafford question, by the way, in Twitter questions, so maybe I'll wait for that. Are you really taking on Kirk Cousins' contract? I don't know. Daniel Jones? Every answer you say at quarterback, because that's where the list just gets. Every name you mentioned, Winston, Heineke, Brissett, Wentz, Mac Jones, I guess Andy Dalton re-signed with Carolina, but you know the list of guys that are out there. Everyone is met with the same sound that I make when I get out of bed in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
All of them. Some, maybe it's a better day you get out of bed than others, but Winston. He was 2-5 last year with the Browns and 13 touchdowns and 12 picks. Is that real competition? Or because he's Jameis Winston, that's why we kind of hype it up of he's better than some of the other options. It's just,
yeah.
So that's where I do have a little bit of concern. It sounds like the footwork, too fast, basically the footwork for Anthony Richardson. And I do think Anthony Richardson deserves an open-minded view of what does a healthy offseason mean for your fundamentals. What does it mean? Now, Eddie, a question I had is they have opted for continuity in the voices around him. Do you find it ironic that after 2 years that it's Houston that's made the offensive coordinator change and not Indianapolis? CJ Stroud's won 2 playoff games and they've made the coordinator change?
Yeah.
Whereas the Colts have sat here and said, nope, Shane Steichen, Jim Bob Cooter, Cam Turner are all coming back. So, I asked Shane that yesterday and he basically said, he believes continuity. Which, again, you can get 2 very different, I think, thoughts of what a young quarterback needs. Do they need the continuity or, when they have struggles, do you make a change there? I find it ironic that Andrew Luck had 2 very dominant personalities and 2 very accomplished coaches right, when he walked into the NFL, and Bruce Arians and Clyde Christensen. Whereas Anthony Richardson didn't have that or hasn't had that and won't have that in 2025. So I still think the Colts want him to be the starter. I'm resigned to the fact of, and maybe it's PTSD and scar tissue, Eddie, of I've seen those quarterbacks before in a Colts uniform. I don't need to see them again.
Right.
You and I have said that. I've said this quite often to you over the last week, or I should say month plus. To me, it's just Richardson or bust. You either figure it out with him or you don't.
Yep.
And if not, time to blow it all up. So those are kind of my general Richardson thoughts and listening to Steichen and listening to Ballard yesterday. How about you?
So to kind of piggyback off of the competition aspect of it, I'm with you on what you just said. Because if they bring in, let's say, Justin Fields, and I don't even know if Justin Fields wants to come to Indianapolis for either. Because
if I'm Pittsburgh, I'd probably re-sign Fields.
I would too, and if you're Justin, aren't you trying to go somewhere where you know you're going to be the starter? Are you trying to go to Vegas? Are you trying to go back to Pittsburgh? Are you trying to go to New York? Either New York team for that matter. where you know if they sign you, you're going to be the guy. The same can be said for Sam Darnold. Or because to me, if you bring in a Justin Fields, you're probably going to have to offer up more money than those other teams because he's not going to come to you unless he has a realistic shot at, being QB1, or he's getting paid more money to compete with Anthony. And not to mention, this is the other aspect of it from my perspective. If you bring in a quarterback and it's Fields, it's Darnold, or it's Daniel Jones, or it's, insert other name here, and that quarterback beats out Anthony in training camp and wins the starting job, that is not good.
No.
For Chris, that is not good for Shane, and that is not good for Anthony. They might as well just pack their bags and have their bags ready to go as soon as week 17 or week 18 is over, because that means you totally failed with the way you developed, and that means that Anthony did not improve in your eyes at all during the offseason in which he was fully healthy for the first time in his young career. And not to mention, the other aspect of this is I think if you did that and the other quarterback wins, it is going to completely shake and ruin his confidence. Because how many times do you see it across the NFL where a young QB gets benched or they lose the starting job early and they cannot come back from it? Bryce Young might meet an anomaly because he balled out after he came back from the benching to Andy Dalton. That's where I stand on it. I think Jameis Winston would be the perfect guy to go out and get to complement Anthony, just because he's a former lottery pick like Anthony was. And I think he's the kind of player and backup quarterback that will empower Richardson to get better and help him.
Put his arm around him a little bit more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't think Flacco, he even said that at numerous times last year, is that I don't think Flacco went out of his way to kind of put his arm around Anthony at all as the backup.
I think there's some really valid points that you laid out there. I'm with you. I mean, if Richardson gets benched again, I mean, it's over. I mean, I was pretty bullish last year when he got benched. I'm like, no, he will still get another chance. I guess he got another chance, later in the season, obviously, after 2 weeks. And then I still think he'll get a chance here in 2025. But the Colts have to do their due diligence. And, let's just play this out, for example. Richardson starts 13 games next year. Let's say it goes well. Let's say he's 8-5 as a starter through 13 games. Mm-hmm. That leaves 4 games he doesn't play, and you need to try and save your season. So if you're 8-5, if you go 1-3 in those, 9-8's a whole lot different than if you go 3-1 and you go 11-6.
Yeah.
So, finding a capable backup still matters. Flacco and Ellinger are both free agents. Mm-hmm. So just your quarterback room in general, only has Jason Bean left in it. So, but again, defining real competition. I would be somewhat surprised if we saw this 50-50 split of camp reps, almost to the point of Richardson consistently running with the second team. I don't think that'll be the case. Now, again, the answer we get here in a week or two will also tell us a whole lot on exactly who that player is. Mm-hmm. Daniel Jones is one that I keep on coming back to of could that be the one? Again, we'll kind of cross that bridge as it happens. Sounds like stylistically they don't really care, which, is what Ballard has said before. They don't really care, what that type of quarterback is behind Richardson. So
should it care to you?
I'm a little split on it. There's been times where I think it makes sense for your offense to say the same, but I also think there's not a lot like Richardson. Fields obviously brings a run element. Daniel Jones honestly brings a little bit of that element. That's fine and well, but they've won games with Minshew and they've won games with Flacco. I think if you get too into the style, then you all of a sudden alienate yourself from other quarterbacks that could be of decent quality. Mm-hmm. So I'm not as married to it as maybe I would be in the college game, where I think it might be a little bit more difficult to move on from one to the other. I want to begin with Braden Smith. I think that's the biggest domino walking away from the combine. Last year it was Michael Pittman Jr. Mm-hmm. Would you keep him? What would it look like? Okay, they tagged him. Boom, here's the long-term deal. For me, it's Braden Smith. He wants to keep on playing football. Okay, question 1 is answered. Now, will he play for the Colts? You just heard Ballard's answer. Not 100%, and he used the word hopefully. Eddie, anytime I hear the word hopefully, I say to you, I'm hopeful to play Augusta National. Do you think they have any open twilight tea times today?
Probably.
Give them a call?
Probably not.
Tomorrow. A lot of direct flights to Atlanta. Flew into that airport for the national title game. Beautiful. Maybe not beautiful, but enough flights. Hopeful it's just it's not a very definitive word. So that to me is the biggest question. Is he back with the Colts? Is he back at that price tag? And we're not used to having these questions with the Colts and players under contract. They don't do this. They don't mess around with their own guys under contract. Hell, they usually give them extensions that are in the final years of their deals.
Right.
So we're not used to this, but it's a huge domino because as you and I have pointed out, theoretically, if you are to move on from Braden Smith, cap hit I think is $19 million, you don't use that at tackle. Yes, you would want some depth there, of course, but you're not going out to find a new starting right tackle. I would assume Matt Gonzalez would be that at making a little over $1 million.
2 passing of the batons in one offseason.
Right, which again is a bit of a scary element, but you did draft these dudes in round 3 and 4. It's not like you drafted them in round
6 and 7, yeah.
Or they're undrafted even. So on paper, Eddie, this is a huge, huge domino for the offseason.
Nearly double their cap space.
Right. That is a big number. And again, I don't think you would then need to say, whatever, 80% of that cap space we just opened up needs to go to offensive tackle. Yes, you need to do something at offensive tackle to create some depth. I don't think Blake Freeland can be your swing tackle for 2025. But still, you could allocate that to other positions. So, very interested. I'm probably in the minority. I still think a healthy Braden Smith is a pretty quality player.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at that price tag, though, oh boy. The restructuring of it, is that something that Ballard was kind of hinting at? But then say, he had a kind of a throwaway line to a lot of people at the podium on Tuesday of like, he said Mike Bloom, their cap guy, he's going to have some work to do or something along that lines. Yeah, again, I don't remember him saying that too much. What does he mean by that? Does he mean opening up cap space? He didn't seem to indicate Samson Ebicom's going anywhere. A lot of people mentioned him as a cap casualty, coming off the Achilles in a contract year.
And you just drafted Latu.
He openly brought up Ebicom as someone he's interested to see with Anarumo. I assume that means he's back. So, again, if you're going, they can create cap space. I mean, there are several players.
Rodney Thomas is another one, right?
Yeah, Raekwon Davis and Rodney Thomas would probably be the other two that I mentioned. So,
because Thomas is an odd structuring of a contract, right? It's like $250,000 or something in dead cap.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. To me, it's weird. I'd have to look into it more. It's weird. It's such a big number for a 7th rounder, but that's what it is. So again, I think we'll exit, or at least for me, I will exit the combine as that's the biggest domino. And Eddie, now what I turn to is this. And again, I try to think about my thoughts in regards to these million Colts questions that we discuss on the podcast. And then I try to remind myself, Kevin, don't be emotional. Don't have PTSD. But then when I say the PTSD part, I think to myself, you know what? If it happens under these people's watches, i.e. Ballard, i.e. Steichen, I think it's okay then to ponder that element to it. And I say all that to mean this. What about PTSD with Anthony Costanzo?
Yeah.
I had a lot of it back 3 or 4 years ago. When Costanzo first flirted with retirement, I don't know if I said to you or Chris Presley or Joey Molinaro or who it was, but I said, you almost have to treat it like he's not in the building. Or he is one step out, certainly.
Yeah.
They thought Costanzo would give him 2 more years. Well, he gave him 1. And what did that mean? We had to watch Matt Pryor at left tackle. So, Eddie, that's PTSD for me. Now, that's PTSD under this GM's watch. That's not PTSD. I'm not bringing up a Grigson era. I'm not bringing up a, Ben Ijalana or, insert your random offensive tackle from previous regimes. No. That happened under Ballard's watch. So I'm interested in that in regards to Braden. And again, maybe it's not apples to apples. It was a personal issue. I thought Costanzo was always pretty vocal and always seemed like, yeah, he's going to go to the Silicon Valley whenever he's done. But still, it's a premium position. It's an older tackle. That is something to keep an eye on. So that would probably be the last element on the Braden Smith front that I would have.
Yeah, I think you covered it all pretty much there. It would suck to see him go just because of how good he's been for the Colts and how durable, he's been, even though he's had the knee issue. I hope that, I don't know what's going on there, but I just hope that he can continue playing football, at the level in which he can, because when he's out there, like you said, he is He is a starter in the
just
NFL.
A
He's
solid
one of the
pro. He just goes about his business in a very quiet manner.
He's not like a top. I don't know if he's a top 10 tackle. He's not a bottom 10. He's just really, really solid.
And there's been a couple years where your numbers with and without him in the lineup was jarring.
Oh yeah,
just how much he would mean. Other item I want to get to, Eddie, is would the words be different? In January, Chris Ballard's words were different in my eyes. They were. I was worried. Well, not worried. I was curious if they were emotionally charged. You just missed the playoffs. You're getting a lot of questions about your job security.
In regards to what?
The lack of competition. The mistake in running it back. I shouldn't have believed in continuity so much. Those are great. Those are great comments. To drum up.
Mm-hmm.
Again, he falls on the sword so well. How many times have I said that to you? I mean, he's. Are the Oscars on Sunday? I mean, he deserves Best Actor for his ability to do that. I actually think some of it is genuine, but again, that hasn't meant that his actions will be different. Now, the words have sounded different, and I was curious this week, would they continue to sound different? Now, to be fair, he was not asked many questions about free agency and his plans there. But at one point he was. This was off the podium. This is towards the back wall there in the convention center.
With the local media?
Yeah. And he said twice, he kind of doubled down on it. We have to make the team better, plain and simple. I told you all at the end of the season, we need to make this team good enough to win, and I have not done that. I need to make this team good enough to where our staff has enough to win games. So, again, when I think you hear that, that is not, I'm afraid to pay B players A money. That is not, I'm worried about the message you send your locker room when you give a player that big of a contract, et cetera, et cetera. That is not that. So, ultimately, we're about to get actions on it. I'm not expecting a huge spending spree. He just said it to us there, but I do think you could see some things differently. And, he said something to us there, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but sometimes you just have to finish it. And I think that is what, again, I don't remember hearing that phrase.
And it was monetarily too.
Correct. That is a key element to point out there. I'm trying to think other items to me that caught my eye. The Anarumo quotes I thought stood out. I thought Shane Steichen was actually pretty candid on Anarumo. I said to you right after they hired Anarumo, Eddie, I think a huge reason why they hired him is because, frankly, Anarumo's kicked Shane Steichen's ass in a couple meetings.
Yeah.
To sum it up, he's done that. He did it once in San Diego when the Chargers played the Bengals, and then a couple years ago with Bengals and Colts. And Shane, he didn't say it maybe as eloquently as that, but he definitely said it on Tuesday. A little bit more multiple, a little bit more aggressive from a pressure standpoint. Sounds like some press man. A little bit more disguise. Again, I think all the words you're hearing in different defensive approach, I think are words you want to hear. I think it's just a little bit more stress you're putting on the opponent. And I think that is welcomed and was needed. Again, we'll see how it plays out, but I think in general, this approach is needed. Now, a couple questions I have, Eddie, would be this. Trey Hendrickson is not a Colt. He led the league in sacks, each of the last 2 years, I think? Or maybe if you combine them both, he's led them sacks. Nonetheless, they didn't blitz a ton. They blitzed more than the Colts, but, lo and behold, everybody blitzes more than the Colts. Do you feel like you need to either A, blitz more, or B, do you trust these corners in-house? Now, Ballard, and he said it right there, kind of asked him, hey, what positions do you scout differently? Ballard went right to the defensive front, which I found that interesting. Could D-line be the pick at 14? And then I kind of asked him the follow-up there about corner.
He kind of tossed in, too, that they have been meeting with a lot of defensive players.
Right, which, again, this draft has a ton of, a lot of defensive linemen. I think it's defensive tackles, a huge allotment here at the Combine. But he did mention, we feel like we have some corners that can play this system on the roster. Because that's again a question I've had of
Juju, Jalen, and Kenny. Are those the three or the sum? Or are you just talking about Kenny and Jalen? You can't count on Juju yet.
Right. Again, you have to act like Jelani Woods and Juju Brents aren't on your roster.
By the way, did you see Jelani Woods hit over 20 miles an hour on the treadmill?
I did. Great. Happy for him. Hope he stays healthy. You got to act like he's not on the roster. So, again, what does the press man mean for blitzing? What does it mean for the cornerbacks on the roster? Now, I thought Ballard was pretty bullish, more so with us than he was with the media the day before. I thought he was pretty adamant that they need DBs.
Mm-hmm.
He really kind of doubled down on that. So I would agree. Eddie, might be a topic for next week, but let's play out the what position needs a vet, what position needs a draft pick, and what positions need both.
Oh, I'd love to play GM.
That to me, I think is such a key element of the offseason. I would argue the secondary needs both. They need short-term and they need long-term. Katie Moore's not getting any younger.
Correct.
Obviously, Julian Blackmon's a free agent. I thought the news out of Miami this week was an interesting one about letting Javon Holland hit free agency.
Yep.
I don't think I've ever heard a coach say, yeah, he's earned the right to hit free agency, and then they bring him back. That seems like a rarity. And when you look at Holland, that is a 25-year-old safety.
Coming off a down year.
When you play out I would say downish. I mean, he definitely had better years, I would say, early in his rookie contract. But when you start to play that one out, that is a veteran, but he also can be part of your blueprint in 2027 and 2028. He's not Justin Simmons or something like that. So I think that's something that I'm going to keep an eye on. Anarumo-wise, anything stick out to you?
Not really. You just kind of said the things that you expect,
I do think Lou will want some more hog mollies.
Makes sense with how Chris said that they want defensive line is a bit different on how they evaluate guys.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Cincinnati, they had some big dudes.
DJ Reader, Sheldon Rankins,
BJ Hill. I mean, big dudes. Wide
Was it
dudes.
Rankins that just got released from there?
They did.
Okay.
Yeah. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. Dio, I think, will be a very competitive market for him. I'll be interested to see how that. Ballard mentioned the league notices it. He's going to garner some attention there. Will Fry, sounds like they definitely want him back. Ryan Kelly, I don't know. I'm not holding my breath on that one.
Me either.
That's about it. Tight ends in need to do some work. Running back, got to have some more production there. Steichen did have I thought, an interesting answer on finding that dominant tight end on a third down. What that can do for an offense.
Oh, come on, Shane. Don't tease me.
I know.
Don't tease me.
He was asked about taking a tight end early in the draft, and I swear it was one of the best jobs I've ever seen by him not breaking into a smile.
Really?
He usually breaks body language-wise in those moments. He kind of looks around. He's like, I mean, I'm not going to answer that question, but he just breaks. He did not break, which I thought was fascinating to see. So that's all I got from Steichen, from Ballard. I know they'll organically come up here in Twitter questions and, as we get closer to free agency in the offseason program. But unless you got anything else, Eddie, let's go there.
Just a few to get to. Did my voice just crack?
It sounded, I was good with it. I think it sounded like you were really looking forward to Twitter questions. So.
Okay. We've got three, starting with Max. How likely do you think it is that the Colts go to the trenches with their first-round pick? I have seen a couple mock drafts recently that had them going offensive line, but I think it's even more likely that they go defensive line. The draft seems to be deep at defensive end with guys like the two Georgia defensive ends and a couple others. I know the fan base might riot if this happens, but I was wanting to get your opinion on how likely it actually is. Thanks. Love the pod.
Max, I love the name. I thought it was a dog name when my wife wanted it to be our son's name, but now I say he's my dog, and I love him. And I love you, Max. So congrats on your name.
Okay, that just got a little weird.
What do you mean? I mean, Eddie, without these listeners, man, we don't have a job.
I guess that's true, but I don't know. It just got a little weird.
It's February, man. It's a month of love. Come on now. You never rule it out with Ballard, defensive line. Now, Eddie, I've said this, and you brought up the phrase passing the torch earlier. You hit the bingo card. They do, at center and right tackle, you could make the case they could pass a torch there.
Yes.
D-line, it's a little bit more like who you passing the torch from DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart to.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's not as obvious to me. Max points out very eloquently, loaded in the draft. And then we know Ballard likes the D-line. And I'm torn on D-line, though. I thought in January Ballard liked the D-line more than I did. Mm-hmm. At the season ender. I was like, man, no.
His perspective did sound like it changed a little.
It sounded like that. And maybe Anarumo, again, philosophically, he just thinks differently about their D-line. So that is something to keep an eye on. But I will say this, life after Buckner and Stewart, I don't think those dudes are walking up the 18th hole. I think they're on 14 or 15. Mm-hmm. Now, it could be proven wrong, but I still think they have. But I can't ignore their age either. And you do rotate a ton up there. And in general, I don't think the defensive side of the football has a lot of great young talent. If you listed the 5 best defensive players, are any of them under the age of 25?
No.
Buckner, in no order. Buckner, Stewart, Franklin, Kenny Moore, right? Mm-hmm. You would say those 4, and I don't know who the 5th would be.
You get Nick Cross, Jalen Jones.
Sure. Yeah, that works for me.
Latu.
Right. So, again, one of those obviously would fall into the age of 25, but the first 4 don't.
Mm-hmm.
And, several of them are 30 or older or nearing it. So, I do, again, that's where I look at defense and I'm like, boy, it really would make a lot of sense to try and find the next impactful young defensive player that can be on Lucas Oil Stadium one day.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, have you seen the quarterback situation? And what a Tyler Warren or a Colston Loveland or, one of those can mean. So, Max, it's a great question. I certainly am not crossing defensive line off the board.
On the Colston Loveland train, have you seen that he's starting to rise in these mock drafts now?
Daniel Jeremiah had him 7th on his board.
Yes.
7th on his board. He had Warren 5, I think.
Uh-huh.
And, if you get a little bit more into Loveland, by the way, little injury issue coming out.
Kuiper had him, I think, in the low teens.
Denver has been a lot for me. I've seen him there at
20.
A lot. Obviously, Bo Nix. The thing to point out about Loveland is he's probably a little bit more of a receiver than Warren.
Yes.
And I will say, I think the Colts could use, obviously, in an ideal world, a guy that can do both. But I also think the receiving element is very important.
Mm-hmm.
So,
because they don't have that with Jelani or
Granson is the
Ogletree.
Thought of it, but it's he had the second worst catch rate of any tight end in the league. So,
only 2 tight ends on the roster right now, right?
Yeah, only 2 that,
Ogletree and Jelani?
Mallory.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about Will Mallory.
Yeah. But, yeah, maybe you can't. You only treat it like there's 2. Mo Alley Cox and Kylan Granson, both free agents.
Thomas is giving you 4 positions that are of need to some degree. Would you rather fill with a veteran free agent signing or by the way of premium-ish draft pick at each spot? We'll start with tight end.
Well, look at this. I mean, maybe this is our topic right here.
I guess so.
Tight end, it's interesting. They have drafted there.
Oh, yeah.
3rd rounder in Woods, 5th rounder in Mallory, 6th rounder in Ogletree. Tight end, I'd probably still go draft. O-line, I'd go veteran. Depth. DB, I'd go both. Mentioned that earlier to you. Running back, I'd go draft. Pass catching running back in the middle rounds. And then I just think, it'll either happen in round 1 or round 2, at least in my opinion. I don't know, maybe I kind of view tight end in one of those spots, and the other spot I just view impactful defender.
Mm-hmm.
Impactful defender. Impactful defender. That's where I keep on coming back to. And then a big old defensive tackle. So, yeah, I mean, if I'm tight end, again, could probably double dip. I don't think it's a great free agency class. Probably go a little bit more draft. O-line, I think you have some youth. Especially if you pass, if Kelly and Braden Smith are gone, then you certainly, I think, you need some veterans. DBs, I go both. I think you draft a running back.
Well, you answered pretty much all of the ones that he gave without even giving you the rest. All O-line depth was another one. You hit that one. Corner and safety.
What about corner?
You're asking for my opinion here?
Yeah.
I say free agent. Because I think there are some really good corners out that'll be out there on the market. Javarius Ward, that is one that sticks out to me. Obviously, he doesn't want to return to the West Coast just because of what happened, unfortunately, in his family. And then, I mean, you've got DJ Reed as well, that used to be with the Jets. Rasul Douglas with Buffalo. I lean there. You have some actual options in free agency this go around, more than just one.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
I think the same way with safety too. Like you've got, obviously there's Javon Holland, and if you wanted to go, the 1 year Band-Aid and draft a safety and have him learn behind, Justin Simmons, you could do that. And then there's Cameron Bynum, who was with Minnesota. So, I mean, they have a lot of optionality, as Kevin Pritchard would tell you, with corner and safety in the free agency class.
It's a great word that Kevin Pritchard has helped ingrain into my brain here.
By the way, Thomas added that listened to every pod since the build-up to the 2018 Quentin Nelson draft.
Oh, Thomas, thank you for that.
7 years.
Boy, that was a while ago, man. By the way, shout out to Zach Martin on the retirement.
Oh, yeah.
Eddie, he is arguably the greatest guard in NFL history, and he's arguably the greatest player out of our state in NFL history. So shout out to the St. Matthew Chatard Notre Dame product. Zach Martin. Good dude. Very good dude.
Final Twitter question is from Josh. Might be worth mentioning on the pod whether or not the person who was very against bringing Matthew Stafford to the Colts a few years ago is still in the organization.
He is. Yes, he is.
That being Chris, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and these are my Stafford thoughts from a couple years ago. And I don't think this is hindsight 2020, because obviously the Rams situation has played out, and obviously everyone watched them win a Super Bowl. And I mean, Eddie, let's be honest, the Rams were a player or two away from beating the Eagles this year.
Mm-hmm.
I found myself, like, when people were talking about Stafford and where he was going to end up, obviously the Colts elected not to trade for him, and they opted for Carson Wentz. Certainly, I don't want to act like the trade packages would have been the same. The Stafford trade package would have been more. But I just think, in general, when that discourse was happening, for people out there that questioned or acted like the Lions' tenure was like such a stain on Stafford's resume, I'm like, I think that's kind of unfair criticism towards Stafford. Like, I just didn't think he had enough around him, I guess is kind of how I would sum up his Lions era. And, I just felt like there was a little bit too much of that harping on the Lions and giving blame to the quarterback for that. So, yeah, again, I don't think hindsight's 2020 on that. I think I said that, 3 or 4 off seasons ago, whenever that was. But I don't know. Do you have a good Stafford team on where? I mean, doesn't he just go back to the Rams?
Probably. Obviously, there's the Giants that have been receiving a lot of, attention.
I saw Giants. I saw Raiders. I don't know. It just seemed, yeah.
By the way, NFLPA just released their 3rd edition of the team report cards.
Yeah, I just posted the Colts ones. If you want to, you just read off all the letter grades.
So ranking breakdown, treatment of facilities, B- at a 16th. Food/dining grade was a C, which was 25th. Nutritionist/dietitian, B+, 18th. Locker room, B, 14th. Also 13th with a B. The training room, training staff, 15th. That was a letter grade of B. B- for the weight room, that was 23rd. A- for strength coaches, 14th. How about this one? D+, 27th for team travel. Head coach received an A. Shane Steichen ranked 11th. Ownership, Jim Irsay, B, 20th. Colts, 16 out of 32 teams. Their average letter grade, B-.
Is there anything more Colts than you just listing off those rankings?
Oh, sorry, that was for facilities. Yes. No,
16th treatment of families, 25th, 18th, 14th, 13th, 15th. It just sounds like the Colts, right? Just like a middle-of-the-pack team. And all of it. I guess team travel was poor. I don't know. Are they flying? Are they busing to places?
59% of the Colts players believe that they have a comfortable amount of personal space on team flights, ranking them 28 out of 32. The players feel that their team's travel schedule is somewhat efficient, a rank of 22 out of 32. Players don't feel like they have enough personal space on flights. They want more access to first-class seating.
Interesting. All right, man. You got anything else over there?
Nope.
I like the combine. I'm heading back over there later today. He's Eddie Garrison. I'm Kevin Bowen. Everybody have a great week. We'll be back next week. Colts Corner with Kevin Bowen.